and where he achieved enlightenment. So Xuanzang was a pilgrim. He wanted to go to the Buddhist Holy Land, just as a Christian might want to go to Bethlehem.
Yet the trip came with unholy risks. When the Chinese Emperor Tianzong got wind of Xuanzang's plan, he ordered the monks' arrest. Under this threat, the monks accompanying Xuanzang lost their taste for the journey. Perhaps it was just as well. According to caravan traders, the road to India was choked with murderous bandits and wild beasts. And the worst threat lay just ahead: the Taklamakan Desert.
Somebody called it the Abomination of Desolation. It's a place where you go in and you don't come out. It's really, even Oral Stein talks about other deserts in Arabia as being tame deserts.
By day, its temperatures can reach 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and by night, plummet to 20 below. According to legend, thriving cities whose souls numbered in the thousands had vanished in its black hurricanes, never to be seen again. Caravan traders warned the unworldly Xuanzang about the dangers, but the pilgrim replied,
I intend to visit the holy places and seek the law. I will not regret it if I should die on my way.
But years of monastic study hadn't prepared Xuanzang for the desert's special tortures. Of this desolate badlands, he wrote,
There are no birds in the sky, no beasts on the ground, no water or vegetation anywhere.
So he was alone, and he started across the desert, a couple of 100 miles it was, and his water bag fell down into the ground.
Then the water spills, and he travels for 4.5 days with no water, and he is hopelessly lost.
Now, Xuanzang considered turning back, but he no longer knew which direction that was. According to his biographer, the monk was assailed by the desert's restless spirits.
By day, the wind whipped up terrible sandstorms. By night, demons and goblins bearing torches are as many in number as the stars.
The monk prayed to Buddhist guardian spirits to protect his soul.
It was kind of what some Christian mystics call a dark night of the soul. He went out into the unknown. He experiences terrible things. He has this dark night of the soul. This is a typical hero's journey in the Taklamakan Desert.
In a dream, a spirit called out, "Why are you resting when you should be marching forward to India?" It was the horse that seemed to take offense. He set off in his own direction, Xuanzang following behind. After 4 miles, the horse broke into a trot as a green oasis came into view.
And this old and sickly horse, which has been recommended to him because it's done the trip 30 times, takes him to an oasis, and he falls into this pool of water and just drinks and drinks and drinks.
He was able to survive. He was able to find water and other food to eat. This must have meant a lot to him. I think in his mind, this must be a kind of blessing from Buddha himself.
The stories about people finding water in the desert are recurrent, right? It happens to Xuanzang, it happens to Sven Hedin, it happens to Orlstein. Anybody who goes into the desert runs out of water, and then the ones who live tell us the same story, and the ones who die don't tell us anything.
Safely across the Taklamakan, Xuanzang entered the kingdom of Turfan. Again, he was preceded by his reputation, but as a holy man, not an outlaw. The king and queen of Turfan were overjoyed to have such a renowned scholar for company. "From the first day I heard your name," said the king, "I've been in a state of ecstasy. I couldn't keep my hands and feet still from excitement." But when Xuanzang told him of his mission, the king became stormy. He demanded the monk cease his journey and remain in Turfan.
He wanted Xuanzang to be his resident guru. He wanted him to stay there and not go to the west. And he got very angry at Xuanzang, and he shouted at him and said, "You've got to stay here, and I'm not going to let you go."
Xuanzang objected.
I came here on my way to obtain the great law. You can imprison my flesh and bones, but you cannot rule my spirit.
So he decided to starve himself. He fasted for 4 or 5 days, and he just didn't take water or anything.
Each day, the king brought him rich food, but Xuanzang wouldn't touch a morsel.
And again he almost died, and the king of Turfan was shamed, and he gave in. And then the king of Turfan gave him gold and silver and 24 letters of introduction to all the kings and khans all the way up to India. So he had protection. He was going to be taken care of for the rest of his journey.
The king provides servants and horses and clothes, and the most crucial thing the king gives him is contact with the Turks who control the region west of China with whom the king is allied. And so suddenly Xuanzang has gone from this solitary march through the desert to having a retinue with him and diplomatic credentials.
With India almost in sight, Xuanzang approached the fulfillment of his mission and the greatest trials of his life. By now, Xuanzang had trekked more than 1,500 miles. He'd become a skillful traveler, falling in step with the merchants and pilgrims whose precious goods enriched the trade depots of Western China. He grew into the roles of accidental diplomat and impromptu preacher. And throughout, the always hearty giant endured the unexpected.
After he leaves Turfan, he doesn't have to worry about money, right? He's bankrolled, and he has diplomatic credentials. But then he has the problems that beset rich travelers, like robbers. There are a bunch of robbers who are interested in clothes. It's interesting, he's robbed twice of his own clothes.
He was not just once robbed on his journey, he was robbed many times. Because of his inner strength, sometimes even under a great danger, he was able to escape from those dangers.
Finally, a year after plunging into the desert, the pilgrims set foot on Indian soil. He'd proved wrong all predictions of his imminent death and reached the country of his beloved Buddha. Guided by priests, he visited sacred stupas or shrines, examining the stories painted on their walls and committing them to memory. Assisted by as many as 20 scribes, Xuanzang got down to business, translating and copying Buddhist scripture.
The most significant contribution he made is to translate a large amount of Indian Buddhist scripture. Scholars are amazed of how accurate his translations are.
His reputation seems by this time to have preceded him, so that when he got to a new place, monks seemed to know all about him. And it was customary for the kings to, when he got to the border, they would come and meet him, and they'd give him a big elephant to ride on.
7 years passed like a dream. Xuanzang's celebrated knowledge carried him and his scribes from one monastery to the next. At each awaited new Buddhist texts and spirited debate.
It was customary in many of those countries in northern India to have a debate. There were several kinds of Buddhism, and so one kind of exponent of one kind would debate against another kind. And he studied the other guy's beliefs so that he knew their arguments and his arguments. And that may be one of the reasons that he was so good.
Xuanzang never loses a debate with anybody, even if he's debating in Sanskrit on arcane points of Buddhist doctrine in India. It's just not credible. But every time that he meets somebody, he bests that person in the debate.
At last it came time for Xuanzang to fulfill his personal pilgrimage. He and his followers traveled by boat down the sacred Ganges River. Their destination, Bodh Gaya, the place of the Buddha's spiritual transformation. But on the river, according to his biographer, another calamity awaited.
A whole mess of pirates came in and took his party and shoved them ashore, and they wanted to sacrifice for their god Durga. And they said, "Ah, there's a handsome fellow, he'll be just fine."
And they decide he's the perfect sacrifice. And they tell him this, and he has a very Buddhist response, which is he doesn't want to be killed, but if he's going to be killed, that's fine. He wants to be allowed to meditate.
If this poor body is suitable for sacrifice, then I dare not grudge the offering. But if you kill this body of mine, I fear it will bring you misfortune.
And at that moment, a tremendous gale came and scared hell out of the pirates. And so they said, "Who is this man?"
He was really not afraid of death. He was prepared for death. He's not just a courageous person. He was also a very calm person, an intelligent person. Whenever he faced difficulties, he always showed this kind of calmness.
So, of course, according to the biographer, they threw away their weapons and they became good Buddhists, so to speak.
This is another story that follows a very fixed pattern, which is that the representative of the Buddha encounters the representatives of a given local deity, and the Buddha bests the local deity. The Buddha proves that he's more powerful than the local deity. So, did it happen? We don't know.
These are just stories, I think, but they're good ones.
Finally, Xuanzang arrived at Bodh Gaya. Here, the Buddha had achieved enlightenment. But for the wandering pilgrim, something very different was in store. Xuanzang's trials and years of devotion did not yield even a taste of the sublime unity experienced by the Buddha. Instead, under the sacred tree where the Buddha was transformed, Xuanzang could only weep at the frailty of his own mortal spirit.
When Xuanzang finally got there, he knelt down and he asked himself, in what cycle of life was I when the Buddha lived? And then he wept. And there were lots of other Buddhist monks around, and they were all very